Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time, and today we talk about the ever-existent strange obsession with child stars, because if there's one thing that I doubt the internet will ever rid itself of, well, it's that. I've spoken about children online in the past, and I'll likely speak about them in the future. I'd say in my new style the last time I properly covered this sensation was in my Lil Tay video, which once again attributed a strange fixation to the idea of young kids doing adult things. The point of that video was to document how fascinated we become when someone behaves in a way that is not necessarily expected of them. Whenever you're doing something that has an appeal that no one else is doing, you will typically gain fame for it. And at that point, you introduce the factors that will actually determine the longevity. However, with someone like Lil Tay, the whole system is broken. The fact that it is driven off being more and more audacious. It is destined to slide into an absolute burnout, or you end up not being able to keep up. The outcomes on either side are not particularly rosy, and if none of that fails to kill your career, growing up will. Child fame is not something that really should be glorified. We'll always need children in our media, particularly in areas such as film, to make sure they are provided representation. At the same time, the unique mental circumstances that a developing child encounters cannot be discounted and cannot be exposed to the ravenous hordes of internet dwellers like many of us YouTubers. There are nuances to this argument, and I'll probably address them another time, particularly when that person might be able to exert adult levels of influence. But most of the time, these people are just puppets for fame-hungry parents or siblings who want to find ways to exploit that childhood reliance to make them conduct certain actions that arouse online interest, and use the fact that they're not autonomous to claim any profits and benefits. It's a scummy but unsurprisingly common dynamic that you'll find, and these kids are often the ones who will take the mental fall from it. However, Lil Tay was, as predicted, a brief fad that was in itself an escalation of the juxtaposition between adult behavior and childish appearance, one that could inevitably not be topped, and left a trail of destruction in the culture that had ultimately set herself up. However, the death of one market always leads to the rise of a new one. And the thing is that although many trends are short-lived, they are almost always born out of some longer-term human interest. These long-term human interests provide anchors, and unfortunately the fascination with children being placed in environments that would seem surreal for them is a consistent one. And today, more than ever, this has pushed into a serious boundary. I'm going to leave this narrative on hold because the new market leads us to a very interesting individual who goes by the Instagram username of MelodyOficial3, or MelodyOficial3, I guess. Now, Melody is a Brazilian figure online. Her real name is Gabriela Severino, and according to the very quaint Wikipedia page, she's a singer and songwriter, all at the age of 11. Wow. That's a very impressive feat. She has released a plethora of singles, ones that I'm sure will reach at some point in this video. A few of these songs have performed fairly well on the Brazilian charts. She's been around since 2015 from the age of 8. So she's already had more of an esteemed career than me. One day, morning sun. One day. However, today, as we'll see, she's in the YouTube headlines. Well, in this video at least, so the Right Opinion headlines, for certain conduct that is much more questionable than just writing songs. You see, I have a friend. I know. Surprising. He goes by the name of Marriott. James Marriott, and he made this video on someone he branded as Daniel Cohen's sister, which, you know, I used my genius to decipher it wasn't actually Danielle Cohen's sister. But besides the point, it's spicy clickbait, and although I love a good James Marriott video, I didn't quite have the time, so I passed up on it then. And anyway, he didn't need my patronage. His video was enticing enough for a couple million other people, and he is succeeding off it, and I'm happy for him. But it would be really great if we could get this video to 3 million just to piss him off. No, what caught my eye was when Marriott contacted a group chat that I was a part of with the development detailing this. The information and actually the publication had led to action, and suddenly whatever video he had made on it seemed to be documenting something much more serious. Now, in this DM it said her Instagram was removed, and at the time it was. However, it has since been returned with a lot more of the suspect images removed. I mean, if I had taken heed of the thumbnail, I should have been alerted fairly promptly, but I didn't. After all, clickbait is exaggerative and you don't pay close attention to these things. But really from the start, this should have been a huge cause for alarm, and yet instead of alarm, she has amassed a total of 3.7 million followers on Instagram and comments that are a bit unsavory. It appears in this specific situation, the real catalyst for this development was the YouTuber Felipe Neto, who has approximately 30 million subscribers and therefore a tad bit more clout than Mr. Marriott, though there's still time, James, there's still time. The thing is, in my Lil Tay video, I discussed a lot about familial influence. As a sensation, it seems, on one hand, it is impossible to stifle. However, one of the things that had occurred to me when researching this topic is a very new cultural discussion, and one that I would love to have today. So, join me as we deconstruct the Instagram of MelodyOficial3, her career, her history, her family, the environment that she has yielded from, the culture that has created her, and how this has manifested into the situation that we have witnessed today. One that has allegedly snowballed to the point where authorities have involved themselves. That is rather important information. This is a lot to unpack, and I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do it, but I'm a determined person, and it shall be done. There's a lot more to this than just a James Marriott video. Though, as always, it's a start, the sexy bastard. Let's go. In 2011, TRO released the song Hangover. Generally, it left me with a rather sour taste in my mouth. It seemed a little too overproduced and dizzying, and although it may have worked better back then, it didn't perform too great commercially and signaled the stagnation of one of music's rising stars. Why am I saying this? Well, it's the first thing I encountered when researching Melanie's father, MC Belinho.
Aumenta o som que eu sei te fazer feliz. Ela pegou na minha corda, viu o brilho do cordão. O destino é baixada, nós é o rei da ostentação. Nós tá
MC Belinho, namely Tiago Abreu, is a Brazilian musician. We use the term musician very liberally in this household, but I have to give him credit where credit is due. He is creating music. However, to understand his style, you really do fully have to be invested in Brazilian music, and honestly, we don't really have too much time to completely deconstruct every single cultural element that creates it. But it is an interesting discussion to have. It is not exactly clear when MC Belinho's music career began. However, it's quite evident that he enjoys his music and enjoys social media. The first definitive YouTube channel I found of his was called MC Belinho Funk de Curti, which I was not sure of its translation, so I consulted my Portuguese language expert who told me that it was just really a name and probably relating to the funk genre, which we'll discuss soon. But that didn't satisfy me, so I consulted Google Translate that decided the translation was MC Belly Funk, which I highly doubt is his actual name. But on the other hand, MC Belly Funk is clearly someone who is a very typical product of a culture that he is far too invested in, to the point that it's borderline a meme. In an old biography, I found the very interesting information that he's actually a single father, which is definitely something that we can bring up late, but it's clear that for a long time he has been chasing a dream, and yet it just didn't take off. Probably because it should be quite clear that he isn't individually the most talented. The first video was uploaded, which I assume was his own music pasted over pictures of women, which I assume was the music video, with a female name and the location, Botucatu, which apparently is a city near Sao Paulo. This is content that frankly, I do not know the meaning exactly, but judging from its general appearance, it appears that it was being fairly derivative. What do I mean? Well, let's talk about musical culture a lot. When MC Belly Funk decided to release his first track, the Brazilian charts were pretty Americanized, and it was hard to distinguish a lot of these singles from the more English-speaking markets. This has been fairly common, particularly with hip-hop, which is what, if anything, I would describe the musician as. A lot of Brazilian hip-hop, although without a doubt idiosyncratic in its own rights, still has a lot of culturally defining content that cannot be ignored. However, as you can probably tell, there is an overarching theme, given the fact that it is rooted in a lot of struggle. In the US, rap was rooted in that defiant cultural celebration against an oppressive institutional power who tried to deny what they felt was their identity. This celebration, however, has also become increasingly immersed in many of these celebrations that related to more universal content, such as partying, drinking, and what one might describe as bitches, because the content is more universal, and because the content is more universal, it is thus more marketable. And there are many nuances to this, but know that this is a universal trend, particularly during the years of the early 2010s, when watered down rappers like Pitbull and Flo Rida were at their most profitable. It no longer became about experience, merely being able to rap about pouring it up and creating fantasies for your audiences to become invested over some Red One produced beat. There are very few people who are successful successful in this industry, mainly because it's a set of very complex algorithms with a user-dictated market. And if people's appetite isn't there, your career will just be brutally cut. Look at Katy Perry, for example. Music on principle isn't the hardest to make, but it is incredibly hard to master, and even harder to create a lasting career out of, and therefore you'll find a lot of artists who are trying to break into the industry by creating a conglomerate of cultural appeals following from whatever they view as successful. And that's what MC Smelly Chunk was doing here. The thing is, he's just like any other amateur artist who has a checklist of hip-hop tropes to talk about. There was no way that as an individual creator he was going to break through into the industry. It's incredibly hard unless you're picked up by a label that can provide production value to launch you and you actually have that personality, or you have some sincere bedroom pop vibe that seems all nice and cozy. This is what MC Deli Punk probably ascertained at some point. He did actually make some higher production content which gained views, but also some rather negative feedback. It's on a channel named Funkaton, which I assumed at first might have been some third party, but it was actually on a channel that used to be called Tom Produsoins, with the description giving him the full credit. On top of this, I feel that many of the views came after, and it was still subpar content, created out of some self-obsession he clearly had. And I say this because of the numerous compilations he has of him topless, and the fact that his Facebook reads like a Tinder bio. I'm beginning to think his musical career was just because of some masquerade of ultra-masculinity over the genuine longing for a romantic relationship. Guess those dating apps weren't enough for him. However, he did have a couple children. These children were called Bella and Gabriella, a nice little rhyming scheme going on there. And he still had a clear dream that he wanted to chase. He kind of had that grip on the industry, so at some point he decided to integrate his two daughters. Now, the 2010s were a real revival of the child stars that we hadn't seen since the 1970s, and social media like Facebook and YouTube provided a real platform for this. It appears that this is where Melody was swooped up. We can typically date this around 2015, I'm not exactly sure where the growth came from, but at some point the corporate shark smelled the money and came swimming. Although MC Big Chonk seemed limited in his talents, he clearly had connections, if they could make him look successful while still sounding shite. Now, at first it seems our good MC Papa here was just trying to cash in on the whole child star narrative, you know, the sort of cheap Rebecca Black-esque song which is purposefully amateurish and laughable. However, there were reports on this, and there were also videos supposedly demonstrating her vocal ability. She really just looks in pain, to be honest. These were the clips that are credited for making her a star, and to my knowledge they were originally posted to Facebook, but I couldn't find them, so I had to find their YouTube re-uploads. But with this they made a music video, and that song was, I guess, a hit. They started cavorting with the stars, and this opened doors for Melody and her father. Papa probably saw an opportunity for himself to profit off this sudden success, and although making an 8-year-old superstar seemed rather objectionable, I guess it wasn't exceptional enough to gather anyone's immediate attention. But when you don't treat a tumor, it grows and grows, and oh my god, it's downhill from here, my friends. One of the things I found in research was that there are a lot of popular Brazilian children. A word that is thrown around a lot in the articles that I read was the word funk and funkeiros. Now, this is not the funk that we would typically associate with the word. No, this is much more linked to these terms funk carioca and funk ostentaço, which are both variations of the sort of rap genre we're looking at. And there are many more variations of funk that we will probably encounter today. This is something that MC Telebunk was very invested in, as shown by his creative output. And this is the thing, child stars are inescapable, especially in the era of the internet, and I accept them to an extent, and that's why, in spite of the extremely young age, I'm sure people just write it off, because by 2015, young child stars making subpar music had been pretty normalized in the mainstream industry. So how do we get from there to here? Well, you see, as said, there seems to be a budding market for children in Brazilian music. Researching this, I found a network of MCs, particularly surrounding the Sao Paulo area, and this included a variety of artists. MC Brinquedo, MC Pikachu, MC Bin Laden, all acclaimed to be specializing in the funk music in question. At the turn of 2015, these artists were really gathering steam. However, this market was becoming more and more ridiculous. This isn't just something that has developed into the situation that we are observing today. today. This was a situation 3.5 years ago. And you know, I said, as musicians go, Melody was fairly young. Well, I actually managed to find a younger one who was 6 years old, who released a song that translates as Slap on the Bum. Apparently this one was co-signed by a business called RP Produtura, while Melody was under BM Produtura. It seems there's just this market of record labels swooping up children to make a quick buck. In this kid's song, we can translate some of the lyrics as slap her on the bum, sit down on your pussy. The song was written by his father and his manager Wellington Silva, and the girls in this video are alleged to be his 12-year-old cousin and her 19-year-old friend. Classy. And going back to these child stars, one of the biggest peddlers of this media was a YouTube channel under the name of Programa Panico. They seem to enjoy reporting on these artists, and what you'll see is Melody alongside many other prominent artists, all networking fairly closely. These connections seem to be rooted in one central man, known as Emerson Martins, shown here, who clearly enjoys the company of children. Emerson, although it appears not the manager of Melody, seems to be very involved with creating this specific culture. Even if he wasn't directly involved with everyone, his grasp reached out and promoted many of these people, who then went on to create music with fairly explicit undertones. Let's pull up a couple examples just to entertain you guys. In the song Tava Narua by MC Pikachu, the then 15-year-old is in the street smoking a joint when he is approached by a lady who would like a toke. However, MC Pikachu is a crafty man and demands that she in return gives him the pussy. He demands this quite explicitly. In another song, Rosa Rosa by MC Brinquedo, one translation reads that he would like you to rub your turkey in her because she likes it. At the time of release, the lad was 13. I could go on. And on and on. The number of MCs are endless. MC Guy, MC Pet, MC Ducoventi. I could go on. Now, with all this considered, it's completely fair to say that this caused a lot of controversy and wasn't just swept under the rug. There was significant outrage from people. Given that these artists weren't just making this sort of music, but many of them were performing in adult clubs, partaking in adult behavior, and this caused a lot of stir. Now, on one hand, you can legislate against adult clubs and such by putting an age limit on, but when it comes to explicit music, being able to legislate against such is incredibly difficult. In most societies, we rely on common decency to avoid these scenarios, and this just wasn't happening here. A culture that had been cultivated was enabling this. And if legislators didn't step in, it was only going to go downhill. There was a lot of audiences. These people had fan pages. They were making thousands by being extremely explicit in the way they express themselves. So the Sao Paulo prosecution service opened an investigation to the way these children were behaving. So where does Melody come in? Well, according to many articles I read, it was a viral clip of her that launched the controversy. This one to be exact. This caused a petition to be set up by many people that called on the services to investigate the parents, in this instance the father, for exploiting her and causing her to perform in such a way. In response to this, MC Jelly Junk made a video where he defended the scenario, calling the people who attacked him bigots, and that they just want to shut down the industry that they've created. He basically tried to turn this into a cultural war where these people were attacking him because it was funk, rather than because it was child exploitation. I wanted to find this video in question, but I think it's been removed from the internet. What we do know, however, is when the real consequences set in, it appears he changed his tune and committed to changing the behavior so she wasn't completely taken away from him. It was hard to exactly ascertain the outcome of the investigation undertaken by the authorities, but I found one article that reported the Papa had signed an adjustment of contract that would prevent the sexualization of his daughter. He made a load of comments about how he was going to change, and I even found this video, which apparently was an uploaded musical apology with her clutching onto a toy, symbolic of retaining that childhood. Basically going full T Martin. The thing is, of course, although the laws change, it's the mentality that provides the challenge. Whether the audience was adult pedophiles or children who wanted younger idols and found them in the gritty indulgence, the story never has an end. One thing that you will find is that audiences very rarely completely go away. Even when a principle is legally enforced, it doesn't mean that those people just disappear. They never disappear. One of the greatest problems about this situation is that it deals with expression, which is an eternally blurred line. If I say to someone that a child shouldn't express themselves sexually, I'm not merely saying that a child shouldn't dry hump a sofa, I'm talking about content that might also be implicative to sexual behavior. The problem is, although morally we might all have a clear idea where we stand, when it comes down to the line, we will be challenged in our minds. And the law is even murkier, and it is swamped in loopholes. And our good mate Bellino here wasn't going to lose out on the greatest opportunity for monetary success and fame that he has ever experienced. I mean, look at him. He is having the time of his life. We leave the previous chapter from a man whose career has prospered from the usage of his child and yet is now facing down restrictions. However, the demand for her as a public icon was not going to disappear. So he just had to rebrand a little. One of the artists that constantly came up in reference when observing the evolution was the singer Anita. According to her father, Melody seems to idolize the singer Anita and wants to be much like her, even to the point where she performed a lip-sync version of the Anita song Bang, which is a decent banger to be fair, but I shall not be playing it because it's probably copyrighted. This was her new road, what her father branded as the non-sexual Anita. In spite of this, the video in question still received rather negative ratings because although it may not be breaching any agreements regarding sexualization, its choreography can still be rather suggestive. This is one of the biggest issues, and this is something that will arise again very soon. What he's doing now is he's making Melody imitate singers that may be a bit sexually suggestive and then labeling it under parody. And this is his idea of a loophole. At this point, you should realize that we've reached a conundrum. Sexualization sells, but it's also an absolutely morally bankrupt thing to do, and doing it makes you an absolutely abhorrent human being when it's your child. I mean, it's not a conundrum for us, but it was for Daddy here. And it was a conundrum because he had the authorities looking at him, and he knew if he mobilized enough people against him, then it might be bye-bye money. And bye-bye daughter too, but I think we all know which one was a priority to him. So with this in mind, Papa, and probably many other people who could make a quick buck, definitely took more precautions regarding how she was portrayed in the media. I mean, this one's a rather innocent song about childhood love. This one's a more mature song about relationships. Still a bit strange in how it's presented, and I find it hilarious how they couldn't even get a person with genuine acne and they had to add makeup spots like she was Nanny McPhee, but we'll let that one slide. This time I think what she did was still fairly questionable, but as observed in my previous videos, people become bored of attacking the same person, and I guess what she did wasn't bad enough to rile up any further legal action against the family. Though a pretty prominent declaration was the fact that she deleted her old videos and released the statement that she would no longer be doing falsettos and quote parodies, which was the lip sync content that I described. A load of news outlets jumped on this, so I guess it was important. I think the main reason she pulled the parodies, at least, was because she ended up with a copyright controversy with Rihanna, where she had the lip sync version pulled from circulation. And looking back then, the comments on these videos, the consensus was very clear. People thought she was being taken advantage of by her father. This is not a new thing. People in Brazil knew this. She still ended up in controversy, such as her parody of the Hands to Myself, which once again, it was pretty terrible, but it was that loophole of sexualization through parody, and I guess the fact that she wasn't gyrating in the club meant that it was all right. This is one of the dynamics that the internet has created, and this is why the online world is such a threat, because people don't look at it the same. And on one hand, that's correct. Me making a video for you guys to see is not the same as me performing this to a stadium. But at the same time, the impersonality and the detachment can make people feel disconnected from the content. If she'd done this live in front of hundreds of thousands of adult men, some of which with their hands pretty deep in their underwear, I'm sure, the authorities probably would have swooped in immediately.
We got him.
The problem is that MC Nelly Monk was probably quite aware of this and pounced on the opportunity. This is where we introduce Instagram. It appears that Melody and her sister Bella signed up to Instagram barely months after the initial incident with her father, clearly with the intent of branching out the brand. With a lot of initial content being rather innocent, it was just her posting where she was, what she was doing, and all that jazz. Nothing too provocative. However, Instagram is a platform that I've never really dealt with on this channel, and that's really because I've never felt the impetus visitors to. I don't have an account, you know, why would anyone want to hear about my miserable life? The thing is that a majority of the mega online sites take an extremely accelerated route not dissimilar to that of civilization. We begin by exploring the websites cautiously, pleasure, leisure, just uploading content, and then when enough people are browsing and enough algorithms exist, people try and work them out. And if you've got something like a share button or a like button, suddenly people begin to see how they can obtain influence, whether it's posting snide tweets, pretentious video essays, or in Instagram's case, a whole variety of stuff that I just find impossible to follow. But what will be inevitable is the creation of some hierarchy around some general appeal that's held within a demographic. And once an appeal is worked out, people will try to one-up themselves in that industry. That's what we saw with what eventually escalated to be Lil Tay. You start with something that rides off its ridicule, such as the notion of a kid flexing with copious amounts of money, and then it spirals and the subjects become younger and more audacious, and suddenly this person comes out and fulfills those prerequisites for attention. Now, that's just a general rundown. And as said, the Instagram situation is the main cause for the video today. But to give you a more experienced description of this specific situation, I've decided to bring in an expert on the Instagram industry. And, of course, an expert in bullying kids. My friend, James Marriott. Take it away.
Hey friends, I'm not James Marriott. I know. The resemblance is uncanny. My name's Poutine. I'm a sometimes editor for TRO. I make my own videos on my channel. Check them out, that'd be epic. See, James was meant to be here, but decided instead to go on a vacation with his YouTube millions.
I'm hungry. Maybe I should go to Cafe Bean.
Regardless, I'll be filling in for him. If you wanted to pursue a career in modeling, the case used to be that you'd go through a modeling agency and generally look pretty photogenic or unphotogenic, depending on what they're going for. With the introduction of Instagram, any swamp creature can just rise from the depths of the platform, and with a little digital touching up of their photos, they can become a star. Now, when I say digital touching up, I'm referring to a specific type of photo editing. This is the type of photo editing that typically draws more attention to, shall we say, more sensitive parts of the body. It's thought editing, that's what it is. It's just thought editing. Instagram clearly has an expectation, but anybody can do this. And that's all fine and good until you realize who falls under the category of anybody. Even though the site claims that they won't allow anybody under the age of 13 to sign up, they won't really go out of their way to enforce it. It's also very easy to just claim someone else runs your account, or even easier, lie about your age. But one way or another, children and crowds arrived on the platform. Looking up to their idols like Belle Delphine, you can see how the things they post could easily become sexualized. Here you have this site that promotes and rewards sexualization of content, and you have children coming in trying to follow suit and grow on this platform. That's when you see rise to people like Danielle Kahn and, of course, Melody. If you go to her Instagram now, you'll notice that a lot of the posts, or some of the posts, are rather innocent. That's because she or her management team deleted a lot of the more raunchy photos, but only very recently as a response to public outcry. Some of the pedophiles, Melody's fans, some of Melody's fans, I don't know how I got the word pedophile mixed up there. Some of Melody's fans noticed that the content changed up a little bit, and they're not having any of it. A lot of comments on these now deleted photos were very creepy. It was clear the type of people who were enjoying this content. But after the controversy, now it's kind of hard to find those sort of comments. Typically now what you'll find is people condemning her father, and a surprising amount of people who are her age and just happen to look like they're in their mid-40s, leaving comments about how much they love her, because that's normal. Now, there's nothing inherently terrible about these comments, but if you compare them to the type of comments that I or literally anybody else gets on a daily basis, you can see something a little bit fishy is going on here. Now, I don't want to be the one to say it, but I don't think Pablo's 12. He's looking like he could have a mortgage. He just matured very quickly. The sexualization of Melody's Instagram got so bad that people she worked with, like Felipe Nito, literally deleted all of the videos with her in them because he felt disgusted by how sexualized she was. He even contacted her father and told him this needs to stop or I'm going to do this, and it didn't stop. And rightfully, he doesn't blame her for this, he blames Bolinho. Big Bolinho. While researching this, one comment that I've seen throughout YouTube, Instagram, some of her really raunchy TikToks that are still up, are comments from genuine children around her age that are questioning why they don't look as mature or act as mature as she does. See, children on these platforms acting more mature than they are for attention and likes and whatever else, it perpetuates this cycle of other children coming onto these platforms, seeing how these children are acting, and questioning why they don't act that way themselves. It's encouraging kids to grow up faster than they should. There are studies directly related to this and how it affects a developing mind, and the results of which shouldn't be ignored. Even if you're able to ignore the fact that more adults are singing along to Melody's hit singles than actual kids her own age. I wonder why that is. Uncle Lester, please stop playing MC Melody. Children acting older than they are is not simply pedo bait, it's honestly an epidemic. These kids will develop differently. And I'm sure Melody's gonna grow up to have horrible psychological problems if she doesn't already. But on the bright side, at least MC Bolinho is making fat stacks off of her, so maybe one day he can pay for a good therapist or another chain. One or the other, really. If you're below the age of 18 and you're watching this, hold on to your innocence. Hold on to your childhood. Hold on to anything that makes you not this. Because as much as you might want to grow up now, childhood is a very important stage of life. But there is still more to be explored here, so I'll pass it back to TRO. James Moore, it f***s kids.
Thank you, James. Be sure to check out his channel in the pinned comment. And as James has really outlined, the reason that the Instagram content became more sexual was the same reason why Melody was dropping all fours in the club. It was the market, and the father noticed that market and responded accordingly. And like the first time, he knows Melody is still in the public eye, and even if he can't use her one way, he'll find another. In this instance, no one cared until the outcry. Instagram benefit because it's a ton of traffic, and unless there's real outrage against the platform, who cares? MC Welly Junk gets to release a few more tripe singles about how rich he is, and everyone's winning. Or are they? The thing is that exploitation for business purposes is all that the father knows. And he was just adapting to what he knew, and the Instagram platform opened up an international doorway, because your appeal doesn't solely rely on a Portuguese-speaking market, which on one hand it probably opened up a whole new form of income, many new opportunities, but at the same time you're opening yourself up to a new tidal wave of outrage with people who are not familiar with your established infamy. Still, she has accumulated over 3 million followers, and she's 11. Just let that sink in. Instagram hasn't really done anything, and she may not be prone to online predators on that platform, but you know there are a lot of seedy individuals viewing the content, and at the end of the day, to an extent that is beyond our control. But at the same time, she's a child, and the father is morally dubious in acknowledging these consequences because I refuse to believe he's not aware, and I will call him out for that. One of the many problems is that we have just become so desensitized to a lot of these things, it means they pass under the radar even when they're right in front of our eyes, mainly because the online detachment doesn't make us realize the real implications, particularly when it becomes expected of the culture and what happens suddenly doesn't become as much of a reach. Clickbait thumbnails and exaggerated narratives are a norm, and so we no longer pay close attention to them. They almost become a punchline rather than actual concern. On top of this, the thing about Melody is that it was all rooted in that funk culture. From when she was 8, she had that audience who knew her and knew what they wanted from her, and all this Instagram instant is a shifting of that delivery. It is these same expectations. All of this history is important to note, as it should document a trend. The father was deeply invested in this, whether it's for the money or the fame, or whether he wants to release more intolerable tracks. It doesn't matter. Looking at the situation today, I would not be taking any chances, and neither was anyone else by the looks of it. Under pressure from those around him, following a couple interviews where the mother voiced her concerns, the father wrote a letter apologizing for the mother's absence from their life, and stated that he was working with the authorities to hand over custody to her. What happened following this is hard to say exactly, but it might be a step in the right direction. On top of this, there are so many cultural problems that can be outlined by observing this situation, many of which yield from the society that Melody has experienced herself. One of the constant defenses that I found when dealing with these situations, whether it was from that twat Emerson Martins or the father or anyone else defending the actions, is that it's part of the culture, and these people are just representing that culture and the experiences that come along with it. Those who are trying to shut them down are the oppressors, breaking apart that defiance. They are the underdogs, punching up with their 8-year-old exploitation. This has been an argument ever present, with a lot of discussion related to hip-hop. Whether it's rap or funk, its whole demeanor is representing experiences that are not pleasant. And that is part of a culture. Plenty of rappers do that. And that is fine. But at the same time, it's important to know where to draw the line when it comes to these topics. And it's important the cultural argument doesn't become a scapegoat to conduct fairly heinous actions. Just because Pusha T has sold some drugs in his time doesn't mean that 6ix9ine gets a free pass to underage intercourse. And if funk is representing experiences of children sexualizing and adultifying themselves, whether MC Toy or Melody or many more on the list that have made this twisted hierarchy, then they may want to look at themselves and look at the experiences they create. On one hand, the fact that it might be culturally represented does not shift agency, because this in itself is a relatively recent situation, and many of the people participating in this clearly had the free will to decipher that it was wrong, and they were exposed to the sober criticism of others and they ignored it. The content was not merely representative, it was indulgent, and it was glorifying a concept deeply broken and marketing it to other vulnerable children. There's a vast difference in talking about these experiences and shining a light on them rather than implicitly encouraging others to go out and do it themselves and marketing it to other vulnerable children and questionable adults, and suggesting that this should be the dream. I mean, Emerson Martins called his mansion the Dreams Factory, whatever that's meant to mean. That is a dangerous narrative to create. However, on the other hand, the fact that many people clearly see this as a route out of such a deprived, hopeless lifestyle may be a message to society to wake up, and although condemning this specific incident is the right thing to do, I know that I do not know the exact details of the situation, and people who are close to the situation have to look at this and ask themselves what drives a culture like that to arise, what drives people to affirm that lifestyle, why is there a demand for it, and why has this network been created. The situation in Brazil can be pretty dire depending on where you are, and although absolute poverty has been decreasing, income inequality is still extremely high, and it will breed a mentality where that successful lifestyle is glorified, particularly when it's enabled by an audience or has prominent figures that it will drive to obtain at all costs, even if that means sacrificing your children's dignity. I don't want to deny anyone a chance to escape poverty, but the means have to justify the ends. And I feel this is the wrong way. But when showing something is wrong, it's not just a case of showing people why it's wrong, but it's also a question of showing people a better path forward. I can't specify what path that might be because that is a dive into politics so deep that it would probably require more than just a twat sat at a microphone to uncover. On top of this, it should be time for sites like Instagram to see some initiative. According to the terms and conditions, the sign-up age is 13 and Melody is not 13, and although her dad's probably the owner of the account to loophole this, and we shouldn't just ban pictures of children from existing, there is clear contextual detail that should make this situation rather simple. And once again, without real action, there will be no real lessons learned. The father constantly sought the success of his peers by emulating the lowest tropes of that genre. And as we live in a more interconnected world, that aim doesn't change, just the techniques. And that's the point. Melody's more suggestive content was a general appeal to very seedy figures dressed up in a notion of cultural defiance. And every genre like that walks the line all over the world. And the genres that influenced the Brazilian ones that we witness today did the same. But people should call it out the same. You cannot remove that agency. Because from the get-go, it's clear that MC Bolinho, aka Thiago Abreu, had no discernible talent. And although the daughters weren't anything special either, I would say, they had something that he could compromise on to make them famous. And that was their youth. And that's where many other people with dignity would draw the line. And it's clear that over the last few years, in spite of the constant controversies facing down the daughters, he has been unfazed and only sought to maintain that image, while trying to sidestep authorities at every moment by tweaking a few of the details, whether it was parodies, whether it was Instagram, whether it was anything else. And many Brazilians have been aware of this for ages. And although this is only news to us now, with the change in custody, I hope it will also be a turning point for her life. And it's important for people to carry on keeping an eye on her. And now there's a more global perspective, on top of the presence from Felipe Neto, which has also provided positive influence, not just with the family, from the psychological support, but on social media, such as having her content removed from rather seedy sites. And this has given me a hope that there might be a light at the end of the tunnel for Gabriela Severino Abreu. Before we end, I want to say that this video was sponsored by ExpressVPN. Now, honestly, I've never really been interested in VPNs, but now I'm a personality with loads of people hitting me up and looking for me, and also a lot to research. It's kind of a necessity that I do have something like this that can shield me from hackers and snoopers, but also give me access to sites that I might not have access to otherwise. So in a way, I'm glad ExpressVPN hit me up and offered me a good old sponsorship because I am a cheap bastard. Being the critical man that I am, and obviously given the narratives I've spoken about in the past, especially regarding BetterHelp, I wanted to use their services first, and they let me. I've been pretty happy, and it does make me feel more secure. It helps me traverse problems such as the restriction that the EU places on certain news sites. I'm someone who will regularly need to consume media from obscure American media outlets, and ExpressVPN can enable me to do that. If I want to watch my sad old man political shows in the UK, but the BBC won't recognise my citizenship due to my location, then I can do that. With Article 13 coming in, I mean, I don't know how much I'm going to need it, but I'm grateful that it's there. I really enjoy the service, its interface is simple, I haven't experienced any real lag while using it, it's to the point, nice little cheeky design, quick to connect, has locations in around 90 countries, not that you'd need that many, but it's there, and they keep your content completely private with no real restrictions on what you can do. And my experience isn't the only one, they are pretty revered all round. I haven't had any problems, but if you do, they have customer support, which is pretty neat. I did test it out, I sent them a message at 1:39 AM my time, and they responded in the space of a minute. So they're clearly receptive, and I think it was a human. These robots are getting smarter though, mind you. Even on simple things like filling in a form, I've found sometimes they can grab my IP, and although it may not seem malicious, it's nice to have that extra veil of privacy, and that's something that anyone can encounter, so really, I can see it having a purpose for everyone, to an extent. As an app, it's pretty much usable on every device: Windows, iOS, Android, Macs, Linux, router, and more. I mean, I don't really know how many more there are, but you know, there probably is more. There are also browser extensions. You can get Chrome and Firefox, not Safari though, because people who use Safari like pineapple on pizza, and I made sure we didn't let them in on this. But even if you do have Safari, you'll obviously be able to get it on Mac regardless. It's just the browser extension they don't have on Safari. Overall, haven't had any problems, and if you are looking for a VPN, I would recommend it. Normally prices are $7 a month, but if you're not happy, there is a 30-day money-back guarantee, and if you use my very spicy code by going on the URL expressvpn.com/TRO, that's /TRO as in my initials, you can get the first 3 months off a 1-year package, and the links will be in the description to make it nice and accessible for all you delightful people. That's all I got to say about that. Once again, good on the lads at ExpressVPN for helping me in my time of need. Definitely recommend, if you're looking for something like that, if you feel like it's going to be something that might benefit you, then yeah, I'd recommend ExpressVPN. Anyhow, if you made it to the end of the video, big thanks. Mega shout out to James. Thank you for appearing. I'm going to leave his link in the pinned comment. And I want you to go and send him some love. I also want you guys to go and send the editors some love. They have done a fantastic, stellar job as always, and it wouldn't be the same without them. On top of this, I want to thank my Patreons. Special thanks to Connor. I'd also want to shout out Some Hullabaloo, and a special thanks to Ryan, and also a shout out to Brandon, my $50 and $100 Patreons consecutively, both fantastic. I'm very honored, very flattered indeed, and you can't really top that sort of dedication, so respect it a lot. Anyhow, I don't have too much else to say, so I'll just see you around, guys. Have a fantastic day. I'm The Right Opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.